Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into a place your history books probably gloss over: the dim, perfumed, and dangerously unpredictable world of a medieval brothel. The moment you cross the threshold, the air changes. It's thick with the mingled scents of tallow candles, old ale, and bodies that have been far too close for far too long. You feel eyes on you, not warm, welcoming eyes, but the kind that measure you like a cut of meat at market. A slow, deliberate scan from head to toe, as if deciding whether you're worth their time or just another coin in the till. You probably won't survive this, not without a very quick education. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're watching. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push the heavy oak door open wider, stepping onto warped floorboards that creak under your weight. The flicker from the candles along the walls throws shifting shadows that make the space feel smaller than it is. The nearest table hosts three men in varying states of drunken collapse, their mugs half full or half empty, depending on whether you're an optimist. One glances up at you squinting before returning to his ale. You're not important to him. Yet. A carved wooden beam overhead is draped with cloth meant to look decorative, though its deep brown stains suggest it's seen more spilled wine than needlework. In the far corner, a woman with her hair piled high and ringlets cascading down one shoulder laughs at something whispered in her ear. The sound is pleasant, but it has a sharp edge, like she's laughing at someone not with them. This place isn't a temple of romance. It's a business. The brothel is alive with subtle choreography. A girl in a crimson gown slips past you, balancing a tray of mugs without spilling a drop, her skirts brushing your leg as she moves. Two men in rough wool coats exchange coins in plain sight, their transaction ignored by everyone else. And near the hearth, a tall figure in a faded green dress watches everything, her arms crossed. You'll meet her properly soon enough. Your first surprise is the light, or rather the lack of it. Candles sputter, oil lamps hiss faintly, but most of the room swims in shadow. It's not just to hide the cracks in the plaster or the peeling paint. It's deliberate. Darkness blurs flaws, makes faces softer, hides stains both literal and figurative. In this gloom, everyone can pretend to be something they're not, including you. Historically speaking, many medieval brothels were actually licensed by city councils, partly to control vice and partly to keep an eye on it. This meant they were tolerated, taxed, and occasionally even inspected. The one you've stepped into, it's got the feel of a place that knows how to pass inspection on the one day it matters and go right back to its usual habits the next. You notice something peculiar, the sound of water dripping. Not from a pipe, those don't really exist here in the modern sense, but from somewhere upstairs, maybe a bucket catching the slow leak from a cracked basin. A fringe detail, but in these places, water is precious enough to be rationed. Historians still argue whether brothels at this time provided any kind of regular bathing, or if that was more of an occasional indulgence for high-paying patrons. Judging by the sour smell of some patrons around you, tonight's answer is leaning toward no. You shift your weight and feel something crunch under your boot. A fragment of nutshell, maybe. Or a sliver of bone from someone's late-night snack. Your eyes dart to the nearest candle for light, but the glow barely reaches. The darkness seems to nudge you further inside toward the main room, toward the center of things. A sudden laugh too loud erupts from your left, followed by the muffled thud of a mug hitting the floor. No one turns to clean it up. Here the mess is part of the atmosphere. You think of modern bars and how a spill brings a rag within seconds. Not here. Here spills are just absorbed into the wood, adding to the history beneath your feet. You can't quite tell if you're a customer, a curiosity, or a target. And that uncertainty, that subtle tightening in your gut, is the first real hint that you're not in control. The door swings shut behind you, with a wooden sigh cutting off the night air. The house exhales and you breathe in with it. The tall figure by the hearth finally moves. Her dress sways as she steps forward, and you see the steel in her eyes before she even speaks. This is the house mother, the keeper of the keys, the ledger, and as you're about to learn the rules that can make or break your night. She doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. The room already bends around her presence the way branches move when wind pushes through them. Her voice is low but sharp, each word clipped just enough to make you stand straighter. Coin first, questions later, she says, extending a hand. Her palm is calloused, the nails short, the knuckles broad from a lifetime of managing people who test boundaries. You fumble with your pouch, feeling the sudden weight of every copper and silver you own. When you drop the coins into her hand, she counts them without looking, the way a good card player shuffles a deck. Rules here aren't written on a wall. They're recited once and you're expected to remember them. No fighting, no stealing, no touching without paying. You break my rules, you leave by the alley, not the door. You get the sense the alley isn't a shortcut. Her tone doesn't rise, but it doesn't need to. The unspoken threat is enough. In many medieval cities, brothel keepers were officially appointed, sometimes even required to be women. It was thought they'd manage the trade more decently, though the reality was far more pragmatic. Women like her were chosen because they knew how to keep the peace, keep the money flowing, and keep the authorities satisfied. Historians still argue whether these women held any real autonomy, or if they were simply another layer of the system's control. She gestures toward the room with a flick of her fingers, a movement so economical it's almost elegant. You notice her ring, a thick band of bronze worn smooth with age. It's not for decoration, it's a weapon if needed. Your second surprise of the night is how administrative this all feels. You expected whispered invitations, not a verbal contract. But in her world, clarity is survival. The fewer misunderstandings, the fewer broken noses she has to deal with. She leans in slightly, and you catch the faint scent of rosemary oil. Not enough to mask the smoky air, but enough to make you wonder if it's for herself or for you, a small test maybe to see if you recognize the difference between personal care and perfume. "Drink," she asks, not really asking. You nod, and a girl in a blue dress drifts over with a mug of something that smells like cider, but has the sharp bite of cheap ale. The house mother watches you take the first sip. Maybe she's making sure you don't spit it out. Maybe she's reading you like she did when you walked in. Either way, she seems satisfied when you swallow. A man at the far table slams his fist down in what could be either victory or loss. She doesn't even glance his way. You realize this is part of her control. Never overreact. Never show where your attention lies unless you mean to. She runs this room the way a ship's captain runs the deck. Every creak and groan is accounted for, every potential mutiny noted before it happens. There's a small ledger on the table beside her seat near the hearth. The pages are worn, the ink smudged, but the entries are neat. Names times amounts. You don't need to see your own name in there to know it's already been written. One of the younger workers, a boy with quick hands and quicker eyes, passes behind her, setting a small pouch beside the ledger. She opens it, counts the coins, and slides it into a box at her feet. You notice the key to that box is on a chain around her neck. Probably never leaves it there, even when she sleeps. The most unsettling part. She hasn't asked you why you're here. She doesn't need to. In her experience, everyone comes for the same handful of reasons. Your specifics are just details. You feel her gaze follow you as you step toward the main room again. Not in a hostile way, more like a shepherd keeping track of a stray sheep. And you can't shake the feeling that if she wanted to, she could stop you from leaving without raising her voice. You wonder how many people have tested her rules and regretted it. Probably the same number who left by that alley she mentioned, and probably none who came back. You hear it before you see it, the faint slosh of water against wood, the creak of a tub that's older than the rafters above your head. The house mother's sharp gaze nudges you toward a narrow hallway at the back, where a chipped door stands ajar. A thin curl of steam escapes through the gap, carrying with it a smell that's equal parts lavender and something metallic. Inside the bath is not the marble paradise you might have been daydreaming about. It's a squat, iron-banded wooden tub, the kind that groans under your weight and splinters if you shift too much. The water inside is lukewarm at best, a cloudy gray that hints it's been shared. A thin bar of lye soap perches on the edge like a guilty secret, its surface slick with other people's touch. A girl with tired eyes and sleeves rolled to the elbow stirs the water with a wooden ladle. "You want it hotter?" she asks, though her tone says she's hoping you'll say no. You glance at the fireplace where a small kettle hangs. Judging by the lazy wisp of steam, hotter would mean waiting another 20 minutes. In truth, medieval bathing habits were complicated. Contrary to the myth that everyone was perpetually filthy, many towns had public bathhouses until fear of disease shut most of them down. Brothels sometimes filled that gap, offering patrons a freshening up before business. Historians still argue whether it was about hygiene or just another service to pad the bill. Judging by the tub in front of you, it's leaning toward the latter. You step closer, catching a glint in the water. Tiny flecks of something, maybe herbs for fragrance, or maybe just the last bather's hair. You decide not to ask. There's no privacy curtain. Instead, the room's far wall opens into a slatted screen, and you feel the occasional gaze from the other side. A laugh, soft, conspiratorial, floats through the gap. This isn't just about cleaning. It's theater. Your presence here is part of the performance whether you want to play along or not. You test the water with your fingers. It's tolerable. Removing your boots, you notice the floor beneath your feet is damp and slightly sticky, like ale that's been spilled and never quite mopped up. The boards sigh when you step in. The water climbs your legs with a warmth that's less refreshing and more resigned. Halfway through, a boy no older than 15 slips in through a side door, carrying another ladle of hot water. He pours it in without ceremony and vanishes before you can thank him. The girl by the tub shrugs. Don't mind him, he's just the runner. Knows the house better than anyone. You file that away, knowing the shortcuts here might matter later. She offers you a rough linen cloth, more exfoliation tool than comfort. As you scrub, the air thickens with a mix of lavender and wet wood, and the candlelight turns everything a muted gold. It could almost feel calming if not for the sound of footsteps pacing just outside the door. You wonder if anyone's ever actually relaxed here. Maybe in the first minute before the mind starts tallying the risks. After all, water like this is a shared story. Every stranger's day dissolves into it, mingling in ways you'd rather not picture. The girl catches your hesitation and smirks. Better than nothing, she says. She's not wrong. Your bath ends abruptly when another patron arrives, a broad-shouldered man with a laugh too big for the room. He's already unbuttoning his shirt as you step out, dripping onto the warped boards. The girl hands you a towel that smells faintly of smoke. Next, she calls over your shoulder, as if you were just another task to tick off the list. You dress again, still damp, your skin prickling under the weight of your clothes. There's no mirror, so you can't tell if you look cleaner, but you definitely feel observed. When you return to the main room, you catch the house mother watching from her usual post. She nods, barely perceptible, and you're not sure if it's approval or just a tally mark in her invisible ledger bathed, accounted for, moved along. You barely make it 3 steps into the main room before a wiry man in a faded burgundy vest shoves a bundle of fabric into your arms. "Put this on," he says, already turning away. The cloth smells faintly of cedar, but there's an undercurrent of something sharper, sweat smoke, and a hint of mildew that no amount of airing out could erase. When you unfold it, you realize you've been handed not one garment, but layers, undershirt, doublet, breeches, and a sash the color of old wine. The linen is coarse, the wool scratchy. The seams are uneven, some clearly repaired by less than skilled hands. You slip the shirt over your head, and immediately the collar bites at your neck. The doublet, once laced up, squeezes your ribs just enough to remind you this wasn't tailored for comfort. Fashion in medieval brothels wasn't about practicality, it was about spectacle. Patrons often wanted the illusion of a character to enhance the night, a sailor, a soldier, a merchant from a far-off land. Historians still argue whether these outfits were meant to flatter the wearer or simply entertain the paying crowd. In your case, it feels less like dressing up and more like dressing down, stripped of your own clothes, and with them a bit of your dignity. As you tug on the breeches, you notice the fabric is stiff in odd places, as if it's been stored folded for far too long. The waistband cinches awkwardly, pressing against your damp skin from the bath. The sash is the only part that feels halfway decent, soft, almost silky, but it's frayed at the ends, threads dangling like they've given up. A girl in a moss-green gown passes by and glances at you with an amused tilt of her head. "Looks better than it smells," she says, slipping past before you can answer. Somewhere in the room, someone chuckles, and you're not sure if it's about you. Your boots, still damp, go back on reluctantly. The leather creaks, complaining at the dampness. When you shift your weight, you feel the shirt scratch your shoulders like a cat trying to knead its claws. You think back to your own clothes, cleaner, softer, familiar, and feel a small pang of homesickness for something as simple as fabric that didn't bite back. There's no mirror to check yourself in, only the polished base of a pewter pitcher sitting on a nearby table. The distorted reflection shows a version of you that's harder to recognize, cheeks flushed from the bath hair, mussed clothes hanging just a little wrong. You look like someone who belongs here, and somehow that's more unsettling than the opposite. From the corner, the house mother observes, her expression unreadable. She gives a short nod to the man in the burgundy vest who disappears into the crowd. You get the sense this is part of the process, a quiet transformation, meant to make you blend into the room's tapestry, a piece on the chessboard she controls. You catch another small detail: several other patrons wear similar loner outfits. Some brighter, some darker, but all sharing the same rough cut and same lived-in feel. Maybe it's a house policy. Maybe it's a way to strip newcomers of their outside identities. Either way, you're not just in the brothel, now you're wearing it. A man at the next table raises his mug and calls out, "New one, eh?" You'll be itching before the night's done. The laughter that follows is warm enough to almost be friendly, but it carries the faint sting of truth. You tug at the doublet's collar, already feeling the scratch of wool where it rubs against your skin. Whatever comes next, you'll be wearing this. And you suspect by morning you'll be longing for your own clothes as much as for the daylight. You catch it first as a whisper in the air, something floral, faintly sweet, threading its way between the heavier smells of sweat ale and smoke. It's rosewater, and for a moment it feels almost civilized, almost like the kind of luxury you could sink into. But then another scent elbows its way forward, sour dampness, stale rushes underfoot, and something more troubling, an acrid animal tang that prickles the back of your throat. Perfume here is not so much fragrance as camouflage. Workers pass by in a swirl of lavender jasmine or musk, but each is riding shotgun over less pleasant truths. You notice a girl with braided hair dab oil behind her ears before sitting at a table, the tiny vial glinting in candlelight. Her smile is quick, but her eyes keep flicking toward the shadows beneath the stairs. It's down there, just barely visible between the flickers of lamplight, a small, dark movement against the wall. At first you think it's the sway of a curtain, but then you see the twitch of a tail. A rat, bold as you like, scurries across the floor to vanish through a gap in the baseboard. No one reacts. The lute player doesn't miss a note. The drinkers don't look up. You realize this isn't unusual. Pest control in the medieval world was creative at best. Cats were common, but so were traps baited with rancid cheese or fish. In some brothels, strong-smelling herbs like pennyroyal and mint were scattered under the rushes to repel fleas. Historians still argue whether these were genuinely effective or just a perfumed placebo. Judging by the flicker of movement you just saw under the table, the answer here leans heavily toward placebo. The sweet and sour battle of scents makes you dizzy. Every time the rosewater wins for a moment, the musty animal undertone pushes back like a reminder not to relax. A man nearby pours himself more wine, the spill darkening the straw at his feet. Almost immediately, two small shapes dart in to investigate. You lean back in your chair, trying to keep your boots clear of the floor, but a woman in a sapphire gown notices and laughs softly. "They don't bite if you don't smell like bread," she says, as if that's meant to be reassuring. Then there's the smoke, both from the hearth and from a clay pipe passed between two men at the next table. The sweet, grassy smell of the burning herbs mingles with everything else, thickening the air, until each breath feels like sipping from a bowl of stew. Your eyes sting just enough to make you blink more often. At one point, a worker glides past you, and you catch a sharper scent, citrus, maybe orange peel steeped in vinegar. It's bracing, almost refreshing, but it vanishes too quickly, drowned in the tide of the room's other smells. You wonder if she uses it for herself or as a weapon against the pests. Either way, she's moving too fast to ask. The housemother appears briefly at the edge of your vision, murmuring something to the man with the burgundy vest. He disappears toward the back hall, and for a heartbeat, you think you hear a faint scratching in the walls, followed by a dull thud, wood against wood. You can't tell if they're dealing with a rat or just rearranging crates. Someone refills your drink without asking. The liquid's aroma cuts through the air for a second. Dark wine with a sour edge, and you realize that taste and smell are going to be companions here whether you want them to be or not. When a fresh wave of rosewater passes by, you almost want to follow it, just to escape the heavier undertones. But the truth is clear now: the brothel doesn't mask its reality. It layers it like cheap perfume on top of sweat. You're breathing both, and both are going to follow you long after you leave. The mug in front of you is refilled again, this time with something darker than before. You lift it, and the smell hits first sour grapes with a metallic tang underneath. It's wine, yes, but the kind that makes your gums sting and your stomach question your life choices. Still, in a place like this, refusing a drink feels almost like refusing a handshake. The first sip burns a little, not from strength, but from roughness. This is not the velvety vintage of noble banquets. It's closer to the bottom shelf stuff of medieval taverns where the wine might be stretched with water honey, or if you're unlucky, lead acetate to make it taste sweeter. Historians still argue whether such adulteration was widespread or just an occasional hazard, but your tongue isn't exactly reassured. A man at your table slaps you on the shoulder hard enough to slosh the drink. Goes down easier after the third, he says with a gap-toothed grin. You can't tell if that's a promise or a warning. The flow of alcohol here is calculated. Every time a mug empties, a hand appears to refill it. Each refill chips away at your sharp edges, softening your thoughts. You notice the pattern now: drinks come faster to those with full purses and slower to those who look like trouble. You apparently are still worth the investment. The room grows louder as the night deepens. Laughter swells in uneven waves, sloshing against the quieter hum of conversations you're not invited into. A table near the hearth erupts in a chorus of toasts, half in your language, half in something you can't place. Somewhere near the stairs, a jug tips over and dark wine floods the rushes, spreading like a stain in slow motion. No one moves to clean it. Instead, a worker simply scatters fresh straw over it, burying the mess. You wonder how many layers deep these rushes go and whether the floor beneath is more liquid than wood by now. The risks of drinking here aren't just about what's in the cup. One slip of the tongue could turn a friendly table into a hostile one. Loose lips aren't just for sailors. In a brothel, they can sink your entire night. The man with the gap-toothed grin leans closer, his breath ripe with the same sour wine you're nursing. Careful what you say about the Duke, he mutters, walls here remember. He leans back and laughs as if it's a joke, but his eyes don't match his smile. The drinks keep arriving, and you notice something subtle: they're never full to the brim. Just enough to keep you drinking steadily, never enough to drown you outright. It's a controlled tide pulling you further from shore without you realizing. Someone at the next table passes around a small clay cup, stronger stuff, judging by the cough that follows each sip. You politely decline, earning a raised eyebrow from a woman in a silver-trimmed bodice. She shrugs, downs it herself, and wipes her mouth with the back of her hand. Every time you think you've adjusted to the taste, a new note creeps in, bitter, smoky, or vaguely medicinal. You can't tell if it's the wine changing or you. By your third mug, the room's edges start to blur. The candlelight softens into halos. The lute in the corner sounds warmer, and the voices around you blend into a single river of noise. You're not drunk, not yet, but you're far enough along to know that the next cup might tip you into deeper waters. And in a place like this, deep waters don't always mean you float. The shift happens almost invisibly. One moment the room is a chorus of chatter and music. The next it's punctuated by the sharp clack of dice on wood. You follow the sound to a table tucked into a nook near the far wall, where a small crowd leans in like bees to honey. Two men sit opposite each other, shoulders tense, hands resting close to their respective piles of coin. Between them the dice roll again, clack, clack, thud, and the watching faces sway forward. The man in a patched leather jerkin grins broadly, scooping up the pot with a flourish that makes the other's jaw tighten. Someone notices you watching and calls out, "New blood, come try your luck." A space opens at the edge of the table like a mouth inviting you in. The lure of the game is obvious, the glint of silver, the rush of winning, but so is the trap. In medieval brothels, gambling was as common as drinking, often encouraged by the house to keep patrons lingering. Dice cards and other games of chance could change hands with fortunes or debts in minutes. Historians still argue whether these games were fair in the majority of cases, or whether most were rigged to feed the house's purse. Judging by the way the dealer's fingers linger on the dice here, you have a guess. A woman in a violet scarf sits beside the dealer, leaning close to whisper in his ear. Her smile is slow and knowing, and her hand just happens to rest over part of his pile of winnings. Whether she's a partner, a distraction, or both is hard to tell. The rules are simple enough. High throw takes the pot. But as soon as you sit, you notice the subtle glances between some players. A coin tapped twice on the table, a slight cough signals perhaps in a language you don't yet speak. You throw your first round 7. The table murmurs approval, and a few coins slide your way. Encouraging, but dangerous. The second throw you lose, and your winnings vanish back into the pile like water into sand. By the third, you're starting to see patterns. The man in the leather jerkin wins just often enough to look lucky, but never in streaks, always letting someone else take a hand before reclaiming the pot. The dealer's smile never changes, even when he loses. That alone makes you suspicious. The longer you play, the more you notice the invisible architecture of the game. Players nudge each other under the table, share tiny nods, and occasionally accidentally bump your arm mid-throw. The laughter that follows is warm enough to mask the sharp edges of the play, but the coins keep moving in the same direction toward the house. The woman in the violet scarf leans toward you. "Careful," she says softly, "the dice here have a memory." She smiles as if it's a joke, but her eyes flick toward the dealer's hands. You wonder if she's warning you, testing you, or both. By the time you stand, your pouch is lighter, and the table welcomes the next hopeful with the same warm grins they gave you. The house mother glances your way from across the room, her lips curve almost imperceptibly, as though she knew exactly how this would go. You step back into the main current of the brothel's nightlife, a little poorer, a little wiser, and with the distinct feeling that the game's biggest gamble wasn't the dice, it was thinking you had a chance. The scent reaches you before the sound does, rich, spiced, and heavy with the kind of indulgence only coin can buy. It pulls you toward a small side room draped with red curtains so thick they mute the noise of the main hall. You step through and find yourself in the brothel's kitchen, though it feels more like a magician's lair than a place for cooking. A massive cauldron simmers over a low fire, releasing slow spirals of steam. The cook, a woman with forearms like tree trunks and a spotless apron, stirs it with a wooden paddle that looks almost as old as she is. At her elbow, smaller pots bubble with fragrant stews and sauces, each seasoned with spices more costly than some people's yearly wages. In medieval brothels especially, the larger, wealthier ones, fine food was as much a lure as the women or wine. A well-fed patron stayed longer, spent more, and was easier to coax into one more gamble or one more bottle. Exotic spices like cinnamon, saffron, and pepper were symbols of wealth. They transformed a common meat pie into a luxury worth boasting about. The cook looks up and catches your eye. "Hungry?" she asks, voice deep as a drum. Without waiting for an answer, she ladles a thick, creamy stew into a wooden bowl and shoves it into your hands. The heat seeps through the wood, warming your palms. You take a cautious taste, and it's extraordinary. Tender morsels of meat fall apart at the touch of your tongue, and the broth carries a gentle heat from peppercorns. Beneath it all, there's a sweetness, maybe from honey or dried fruit. This is food designed to seduce the senses as surely as any smile in the main room. At the far end of the kitchen, a long table is set for a private feast. Two men in embroidered tunics sit there, their heads bent close as they talk in low, urgent voices. Their goblets are filled with deep red wine, and in front of them a roasted pheasant gleams under a drizzle of spiced syrup. The cook notices your glance. "Merchants," she mutters. "Pay well enough, but always talking like they've got secrets." She goes back to stirring, and you realize she's more than a cook. She's a quiet observer of everything that passes through these walls. In a place like this, the kitchen isn't just for food. It's for gathering information, eavesdropping through open doorways, catching the tone of a conversation, even if not the words. A door at the back swings open, and one of the house girls slips in. She's younger than most, hair damp from a quick wash, and she moves with a slight limp. She trades a whispered word with the cook, who hands her a small parcel wrapped in cloth. The girl tucks it into her bodice and leaves without a glance your way. "Medicinal herbs," the cook says softly, seeing your raised brow. "Some things we can't trust the apothecary to provide." Too many questions. She doesn't elaborate, but the weight in her voice makes it clear she's not speaking of harmless remedies. Your stew is gone before you realize you've eaten it all. The cook takes the empty bowl, refills it without asking, and waves you toward a bench in the corner. Eat. The night's long, and you'll need your strength. For a moment, you sit in the warm glow of the kitchen, half lulled by the rhythm of chopping knives and the hiss of boiling pots. Out there, the brothel is noise and movement, all calculated to keep a man from thinking too deeply. But here in the belly of the house, you can almost imagine it as a place of comfort, until you remember that every bite, every spice is part of the same game. You finish your second bowl and step back into the main room. The music hits you first, then the laughter, then the subtle shift of eyes sizing up your return. Somewhere a fresh round of dice hits the table. The night isn't over yet, not by a long shot. The air feels thicker when you return to the main hall, as if the very walls have inhaled the smoke, perfume, and sweat, holding it in a slow, unending breath. Laughter cuts through the music like flashes of silver in a dark river, and somewhere to your left, the sudden clatter of dice hitting the table pulls your attention. You drift toward the sound and find a gambling corner carved out of the shadows. A semicircle of men leans over a low table, each face a blend of greed and desperation. The dealer, a lean man with a sharp smile and sharper eyes, moves the dice cup like a conjurer. His fingers seem boneless, pouring the dice onto the felt with a flourish that makes every throw feel like destiny itself. The brothel's gambling tables aren't just for coins, they're for favors, debts, and promises that can stretch into years. The dealer's gaze flickers toward you for a heartbeat, measuring then away again, as though deciding you're not worth his immediate attention. A woman draped in peacock blue silk stands behind one of the players, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. She's not here to play, she's here to tilt the game. A whisper in the right ear, a touch on the arm, and suddenly a man wagers far more than he should. You watch a round play out. One man wins a modest pile of silver, grinning as though he's been crowned king. Another loses so badly his hands start to tremble. The dealer leans in, speaking softly enough that you can't hear, but whatever's said makes the man nod, slip a ring from his finger, and place it in the center of the table. The game continues. Beyond the gambling corner, you notice a small alcove hung with deep green curtains. The shadows here are thicker, the light from the chandeliers barely touching the polished wood inside. A figure sits there alone, a man in a dark doublet with a hood pulled low over his face. Even from this distance, you can sense that his stillness is deliberate. He's not here for pleasure. He's here to watch. The women give him a wide berth, but not out of fear, out of respect. He's a regular, you realize. The kind whose presence means something to the madam upstairs. Maybe he's a lender, a fence, or one of those quiet men who trades in the currency of secrets. You can't be sure, but his gaze follows the dice games like a hawk tracking prey. As you linger, a new round of music bursts to life. The lute is joined by a drum, this time the beat low and insistent, and from the far side of the hall comes a group of masked dancers. Their costumes are riotous feathers, bells, and strips of silk that catch the light with every spin. The crowd draws in cheering and clapping in time, and the dancers weave between the tables, their masks hiding smiles or perhaps the absence of them. It's part entertainment, part distraction. While eyes follow the whirling colors, nimble fingers lift a purse from a distracted belt or a wager changes hands unseen. In a place like this, even art is an instrument of business. One of the dancers, tall, masked in silver, pauses in front of you. Without a word, they press a folded scrap of parchment into your palm before spinning away into the crowd. The parchment is warm from their skin. You glance down. It's not a note, at least not one written for you. It's a list. Short names, tally marks, numbers in the margins. You don't know whether they're debts, wagers, or something darker, but you fold it quickly and slip it into your sleeve before anyone notices. The music rises, the dancers whirl, and somewhere in the corner, the dice rattle again. You realize the brothel is a living organism, each part working to feed the other food, to keep you here games, to drain your purse, music to hold your attention. And behind it all, eyes watching for the right moment to act. And tonight, you're not just a guest. Whether you meant to or not, you've stepped into its bloodstream. Upstairs, the air changes. It's warmer, heavier, and laced with a perfume so sweet it almost stings. The wooden steps creak under your feet. Each groan a whisper that says you're leaving the public stage behind. Here, the laughter from below fades to a muffled hum, replaced by softer sounds, breathless voices, the faint rustle of fabric, and the occasional low, velvety laugh that seems to curl around your spine. The corridor ahead is narrow but rich. The walls are paneled in dark cherry wood, polished until they shine like still water. Lamps fixed in bronze sconces cast amber light that makes everything glow as though it's dipped in honey. Heavy carpets hush your footsteps, and from behind the closed doors that line the hallway come the scents of wine sandalwood and human skin warmed by candlelight. Each door is different, some carved with delicate vines, others inlaid with mother-of-pearl or tiny gilded figures. They are less doors and more promises, each hinting at what lies beyond. At the far end of the corridor stands a woman in a crimson gown, her figure framed by the light spilling from a half-open doorway. Her hair is pinned with gold combs shaped like phoenix wings, and in her hand she holds a narrow ledger. She doesn't look up immediately, she's noting something in looping script. But when she does, her gaze pins you as neatly as a butterfly under glass. You recognize her without introduction, the madam. Her eyes are not unkind, but they are assessing, as if weighing your worth in coin influence or both. She gestures you forward, the motion smooth practiced. "I heard you were downstairs," she says, her voice like silk, dragged across polished marble. "You've seen our distractions. Now perhaps you're ready for something rarer." She leads you down a side passage, one narrower still. The lighting here is softer, and the air carries a subtle metallic tang like coins left too long in the palm. She stops before a lacquered door painted with a scene of cranes in flight. Her fingers rest on the handle, and for a moment you think she might open it, but instead she turns to you. "Not every pleasure is for every guest," she murmurs. "Some doors stay closed unless you can pay in ways beyond silver." Before you can ask, footsteps approach from behind. A woman in midnight blue silk passes you without a glance, slips through the crane-painted door, and is gone. The madam's smile curves at the edges. She leads you instead to a chamber lit entirely by red glass lanterns. The light in here is strange, soft but saturated, as though the air itself has been steeped in wine. The furniture is low-cushioned, and the ceiling draped in swaths of gauze that shift with the slightest movement. At the center of the room stands a shallow bronze basin filled with water, its surface scattered with petals. Beside it kneels a girl with hair the color of pale wheat, her hands dipping a cloth into the scented water. She looks up briefly, her eyes the pale green of spring shoots, and then returns to her work. The madam watches you take in the room, her expression unreadable. "This is one of our softer rooms," she says. "Some guests want storms. Others want to drown quietly." A shadow flickers in the far corner, a curtain moving where no wind should be. You glance toward it, and for a moment you think you see someone there watching. But when you blink, the corner is empty again. The madam leaves you with a parting glance, the kind that feels both like an invitation and a warning. The door closes behind her, and the red light seems to deepen. You realize with a sudden clarity that upstairs is not merely for pleasure, it is for negotiation, for transactions more delicate and dangerous than anything happening over dice or cards. The real trades here are for trust secrets and debts that bind tighter than chains, and you're now on the threshold of one. The girl by the bronze basin rises with a fluid grace, the wet cloth still in her hands. She doesn't speak, but her eyes, clear and sharp, despite their softness, meet yours for a heartbeat too long. Without a word, she gestures for you to sit on one of the low cushions by the water. When you do, she kneels again, dipping the cloth into the warm, perfumed basin. The scent is impossible to name, something between crushed blossoms and rain on stone. She wrings it out slowly, as if drawing out not just water, but time itself, then begins to cleanse your hands. Her touch is gentle yet deliberate, as though she is memorizing the shape of your fingers. It feels ceremonial, From somewhere beyond the gauze-draped ceiling, you hear a faint, rhythmic tapping, like a wooden bead striking metal over and over. It could be music, but there's no melody. Just the beat, steady and patient, as if marking time for something else entirely. The girl's voice when it comes is soft but precise. They brought you here quickly. You must have drawn notice. You start to ask what she means, but she shakes her head, dipping the cloth again. Best not to speak of it aloud. Her gaze flicks to the far wall where the red light seems darker, almost opaque. A thin seam there could be a door, or just a trick of the silk-hung shadows. Either way, she keeps glancing at it as she works, as if aware of someone or something beyond it. From the hallway outside, footsteps pass, slow, pausing, moving again. The girl's hands still for a moment, then resume. You should know, she says quietly, that in this place being chosen is not the same as being lucky. The tapping from above stops. The air thickens. The door seam in the far wall stirs just slightly, as though someone on the other side is leaning against it. You realize your own breathing has gone shallow. Then the girl finishes her task, folding the cloth neatly and setting it beside the basin. She doesn't look at you when she says they'll come for you soon. Until then, remember what you've seen. You may need it to bargain. Before you can reply, the door you entered through opens not with the quiet elegance of before, but with the slow inevitability of something that has no need to hurry. Framed in the doorway is a man in a dark coat, his collar high, his hair silvered, his eyes pale as frost settle on you, as if he's reading a ledger only he can see. Come, he says, his voice deep and without inflection. The girl lowers her gaze, and you're not sure whether it's deference or fear. You stand the cushions sighing under your weight and follow the man into the hall. The door closes behind you, sealing the red-lit room away. The corridor you're in now is narrower, dimmer. The sconces are farther apart, leaving pockets of shadow deep enough to hide a person. You can feel the faint vibration of something machinery, perhaps humming through the floor. The man leads without looking back, his steps silent on the carpet. Ahead, you see a set of double doors, black lacquer gleaming even in the low light. Carved into them are scenes of the sea waves curling high ships tossed like toys, and figures half human, half fish, watching from beneath the foam. He stops before them, resting one gloved hand on the cool lacquer. Beyond this, he says, is where the real wagers are made. Silver is nothing here. What you offer must have weight, history perhaps, or your future. The silence after his words is almost physical. You feel it pressing in, inviting you to speak, to declare what you're willing to risk. But before you can answer, the doors begin to open on their own, soundless on invisible hinges. The scent that escapes is nothing like the perfumed air upstairs. It's colder, tinged with salt and iron, and whatever waits inside, it's watching you. The room beyond the black lacquer doors is not a room at all, at least not in the sense you expect. It opens into a cavernous space ceiling, lost in darkness, the floor, an expanse of black marble veined with white, as though frozen lightning has been trapped beneath glass. In the center is a vast circular table of polished obsidian, its surface reflecting the figures seated around it, like a dark mirror. There are 12 of them, men and women, old and young, their clothing an impossible mix of centuries, one in a robe stitched with tiny mirrors, another in a sharp modern suit, another in armor so black it swallows the light. None speak. None move save for their eyes, which track you as the man in the silvered hair guides you forward. The table itself is not empty. Laid upon it are objects, strange, singular things, each resting on a square of deep red velvet. A bird's skull encased in crystal. A deck of cards painted in colors you've never seen. A lump of black salt glistening faintly as if damp. A silver hourglass, its sand flowing upward instead of down. At the far side of the table sits the only figure masked, a smooth, featureless oval of pale porcelain hiding all expression. The mask's blankness makes you uneasy. It gives no clue whether the wearer's eyes are even open. The man who brought you here stops at your shoulder and speaks, his tone still flat, but carrying a strange weight. A seat has been opened by loss. The masked figure tilts its head as if acknowledging the statement. The man turns to you. You must place something on the table to claim it. A dozen gazes fix on you now, and you feel their weight like hands pressing down on your spine. The air smells faintly of the sea again, and you swear you hear the slow drag of waves against stone somewhere far below this place. You glance at the table. Every object there hums with a kind of silent importance. The idea of adding something of your own feels absurd. What could you possibly give that would belong among these impossible artifacts? As if sensing your hesitation, the masked figure speaks. The voice is neither male nor female, and it seems to come from somewhere just behind your ear rather than from across the table. Value is not measured in coin here, it says. You may offer memory. You may offer promise. You may offer fear. You feel a prickling at the base of your neck. Fear, you ask, before you can stop yourself. Indeed, the voice replies. A fear is a seed. Planted in the right soil, it grows into loyalty or destruction. Some here find it the most precious currency of all. One of the other figures, a woman with hair like coiled silver wire, leans forward slightly, her eyes glinting. If you give us a fear, she murmurs, you will never hold it again. Whether that is gift or loss is the wager. The man beside you remains silent, but his presence feels heavier now, as though he is willing you to decide. Your mind races. A memory, a promise, a fear. You think of the girl in the red-lit room, of her warning being chosen is not the same as being lucky. You think of the seam in the silk wall, and of what or who might have been leaning against it. The masked figure taps a gloved fingertip on the table, a sound like porcelain striking stone. Decide, it says. The tide does not wait. You realize your hands are clenched. Slowly, you reach into your pocket, or perhaps into something deeper, some private interior space, and draw forth your choice. It appears in your palm as if it has always been there, solid and undeniable. The air in the room shifts. The figures lean in slightly. You step forward and place it on the red velvet square before you. The masked figure stills. Then in that same not-quite-place voice it says, "Accepted." The object vanishes, not with a flash, but with the quiet inevitability of something sinking beneath water. And with that, the seat to your right becomes empty no longer. A high-backed chair of black wood and silver inlay rises from the marble floor, as if growing from it, stopping just behind you. The man gestures. Sit. Your legs feel curiously heavy, but you obey. The chair is cold, and it does not warm to your body. Across the table, the masked figure inclines its head. The game, it says, begins. From somewhere deep beneath the marble, you hear the slow, deep toll of a bell, one that sounds less like metal striking metal, and more like stone dropping into endless water. The air is heavier here, almost syrupy, clinging to your lungs in a way that makes you want to take shallow breaths. You shuffle along a corridor that twists in on itself like a snake, your fingertips brushing walls that are slick with something you don't want to identify. Every sound seems magnified: the shuffle of bare feet, the muffled laughter of strangers behind closed doors, the soft pop of a candle sputtering out. And then you find the staircase. It's narrow, spiraling downward, the kind of steps worn concave by countless heels and boots. You descend slowly, feeling the shift in temperature with each turn. It's warmer below, but not in a pleasant way. The smell is stronger, tinged with mildew and something metallic like rust or old coins. Historians still argue whether such underground chambers in medieval brothels were purely for storage, or whether they doubled as places of punishment or secret trade. You can't tell which truth is waiting for you, but either way, you're walking right into it. At the base of the stairs, a low archway forces you to duck. The room beyond is lit by a single oil lamp hanging from a chain, its flame flickering in the stagnant air. Shadows crawl up the curved stone walls, and you notice strange marks scratched into the surface symbols you can't decipher. Maybe they're tally marks. Maybe they're warnings. You can't shake the idea that the stone remembers everything that's ever happened here. In one corner, barrels sit stacked like squat sentries, some leaking dark liquid that seeps into the floor. A crate lies open nearby, filled with tiny glass vials. They catch the lamplight in dull flashes. You lift one. The liquid inside is thick, cloudy. A memory surfaces upstairs. You overheard a man boasting about a concoction that could make a person forget an entire night. You set it back quickly. The fact is, substances like this were not uncommon. There are records from medieval cities describing potions sold in the shadowy margins of brothels. Whether they were aphrodisiacs, tranquilizers, or poisons, well, historians still debate that too. A sudden metallic clang makes you whip around. A small iron gate has swung shut across the stairs. You didn't hear anyone come in. The sound echoes far too long in the cramped space. You call out no answer. Then from deeper within the underground, you catch a faint sound, the scrape of something heavy being dragged across stone. You press yourself against the wall, every nerve in your body on edge. The lamp sways slightly, as though stirred by a breath of wind, but the air is still. Your eyes follow the movement, and you notice a narrow tunnel branching off the main chamber, barely tall enough to crawl through. That dragging noise is coming from there. It's slow, deliberate, like someone or something making sure you can hear it. You take a step toward the tunnel, then stop. Your mind flashes back to the bouncer's words from earlier. Not every customer leaves the way they came in. You suddenly understand he wasn't talking about drunken stumbles. In the dim light, you see a pair of eyes glint briefly from within the tunnel. Too low to the ground to belong to someone standing. Then they vanish. Your skin prickles and a bead of sweat trickles down your temple. You realize you're gripping the edge of a barrel so tightly your knuckles are white. The dragging sound stops. Silence blooms heavy and suffocating. You strain to hear anything breathing footsteps, but all you get is the faint creak of the chain holding the lamp. It's swaying harder now, as if something brushed past it. The shadows on the wall ripple, elongate, and for a moment, you think you see the outline of a figure bending low to crawl. Then nothing. Just the quiet, thick, and absolute. You take a careful step back toward the gate, only to find it unlocked, now swinging open as if it had never been shut. Upstairs, the muffled sounds of the brothel drift down, the laughter, the music, the shuffle of bodies, and it feels like another world entirely. As you climb back into that world, the air grows lighter, but the memory of those glinting eyes clings to you like damp cloth. You're starting to realize this place has layers, and the deeper you go, the stranger and more dangerous they become. Back upstairs, the light feels too bright, the music too loud, the perfume too sweet. It's almost disorienting, like waking from a dream only to find yourself in another dream entirely. Your hands still tremble faintly, and you have the uneasy sense that someone is watching you. The madam glides past her dress, whispering against the floor, her eyes catching yours for the briefest moment. There's something in her look, not anger, not welcome, but awareness, as though she knows exactly where you've been and what you've seen, and is silently asking if you plan to speak of it. You don't answer. You don't need to. You wander deeper into the main hall, trying to shake off the underground's heavy scent. Here the air is laced with spiced wine and crushed petals. Curtains billow lazily between rooms, revealing quick flashes of movement. Bare shoulders, fingers tracing along necks. The curve of a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. You pause at an open alcove where a group of musicians plays a slow, hypnotic tune on lute flute and hand drum. Their rhythms weave through the room like smoke. Patrons lounge on low couches, their cups refilled by girls wearing sheer veils. Every so often you catch snippets of conversation politics, rumors of plague, whispered threats in another language. The brothel is more than a place of pleasure. It's a nerve center for information, a place where secrets are traded like currency. On a raised dais in the far corner, a masked figure performs a slow, sinuous dance. The mask is carved from bone inlaid with gold filigree and shaped into a smile that is too wide to be human. The dancer moves with an unsettling grace, each step perfectly in time with the music, yet slightly off, as though following a rhythm only they can hear. No one in the crowd speaks. They just watch, eyes fixed, breaths shallow. You remember reading about such performances, ritualistic, symbolic, sometimes erotic, sometimes meant to curse or bless a patron. In some cities, the masked dancers were said to speak for the dead, their movements telling stories of those who could no longer be heard. Whether this one is delivering a blessing or a warning, you can't tell. As the dance ends, the figure bows deeply, the mask catching the lamplight in a flash that blinds you for a moment. When your vision clears, the dais is empty. No one seems surprised. The musicians resume a quicker tune, conversations swell again, and you wonder if the dancer was ever really there. A hand touches your shoulder. You turn to find a young woman with hair the color of midnight, her dress stitched with tiny beads that catch the light like stars. She smiles, but her eyes are serious. "You shouldn't go downstairs again," she says softly, almost lost in the music. "Not tonight. Not unless you want to be part of what they keep there." You start to ask what she means, but she presses something into your palm, a small scrap of parchment folded in half, then disappears into the crowd before you can stop her. You glance down at the paper, but the ink is smeared, the words almost illegible. One word, though, is clear. Leave. You tuck the parchment away, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Maybe it's time to go. Maybe you've already stayed too long. Yet your feet hesitate, your gaze drawn toward the heavy curtain at the far end of the hall. The one no one passes through without being summoned. Some part of you knows if you walk through that curtain, you'll be stepping into the deepest, most dangerous layer of this place. And if you turn back now, you'll never know what's behind it. The choice is yours. You stand frozen, the muffled laughter and clinking of cups fading into a low, steady thrum in your ears. That curtain thick as armor yet swaying ever so slightly, as if someone had just slipped through, feels less like fabric and more like a mouth waiting to swallow you whole. A man in a gold-trimmed doublet brushes past his perfume so strong it makes your eyes sting. He doesn't even glance your way. You watch him approach the curtain, murmur something to the attendant beside it, and disappear beyond. The heavy folds seal shut, leaving only the faintest trace of incense curling into the air. You take a step forward, then another. The attendant, a tall, wiry man with the stillness of a hunting cat, slides into your path. His gaze is unreadable, his smile polite but unyielding. Private rooms, he says the words crisp, rehearsed. Invitation only. You're about to speak when the sound reaches you, faint echoing, like the creak of wood and the whisper of chains. It's coming from beyond the curtain. Your mind flickers back to the underground chamber, the cage, the red light, the girl with the empty eyes. And you realize you've heard this sound before. Only now it's slower, more deliberate. The attendant tilts his head, studying you. You've been downstairs, he says, not as a question, but as a fact. Few go twice. You swallow. What's beyond this? His smile widens just enough to show a flash of teeth. Something you don't come back from the same. You should leave. Every instinct screams it. Yet when the attendant steps aside, whether in warning or invitation, you can't tell. You find your hand pushing through the curtain. The fabric is warm against your skin, almost alive. The room beyond is dim, lit only by oil lamps in niches carved into the stone walls. The air is thicker here, heavy with musk and something metallic. A long, narrow table runs down the center, draped in black velvet, set with goblets of dark wine. At its far end sits a figure in a high-backed chair, wearing a mask shaped like a serpent's head. No one else is here. The masked figure gestures for you to sit. You hesitate, then lower yourself into a chair halfway down the table. The wine in your goblet ripples slightly, though you can't feel a draft. I know why you came, the figure says. Their voice is low, smooth, neither wholly male nor female. But the answer you seek is not free. Downstairs was merely the threshold. Here is the bargain. They lean forward, the lamplight catching the green sheen of the serpent mask. You may leave now with your mind intact, your memories unclouded. Or, the word hangs in the air like smoke. You may give me something you cannot take back, and in return you will see what no outsider has seen in 100 years. Your heartbeat thuds in your throat. And if I choose the second, then the figure says, you will understand the true purpose of this house. The silence stretches. Somewhere deep below you hear the slow turn of a wheel, the grind of chains, and the distant, hollow sound of something or someone crying out. You realize you're gripping the goblet so tightly that the cold metal has imprinted into your palm. The choice sits before you like an open wound. Do you take the bargain or walk away forever?